All right, so we'll get started. The boss says so. So I'll ask each of the panelists to do a quick introduction, talk about themselves, talk about these topics, and then as a punishment mechanism, if they stop talking, I'll start asking questions. So in a perfect world, I will say nothing more.
Michael, you should introduce yourself.
Okay, very quickly, Michael Frankel. I work at Deloitte now and lead a venture accelerator, which is neither concerned with ventures or an accelerator. Basically, it's a team that builds internal businesses within Deloitte, not specifically focused on legal. I'm primarily here because I used to run corporate development at LexisNexis. That's my legal background. So. Bill?
My name is Bill O'Boyle. I'm the founder and CEO of North State Consulting. We are able to take companies on a journey from helping them with their strategy, putting things together. We're a big fan of helping people focus their strategy. I heard a lot about that earlier. We also do outbound sales teams and focus on legal. So once we help with the strategy, then we help you sell it, and then we actually allow you to hire our people. So we have people development also. We're a big fan. Put an article out yesterday about overall putting together a markets analysis for the legal industry. I think this is a really interesting time and for the legal space, and we're able to help you out throughout.
Thanks. I'm Carlos Gomez. I'm with Thomson Reuters. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation in the Legal Business Unit, which essentially means that I get to leverage some of the resources that the corporation has to run fund POCs and innovation projects. Some of them are involving applied research. Some of them are involved working with startups or with networks such as Evolve Law. And my background is I used to be a lawyer in Mexico. I'm Mexican. And I did an LLM here, decided I don't want to be a lawyer anymore, joined a startup, joined an incubator, went back to school, and joined the big company. So I haven't been practicing law for 10 years, but I love this space, and just happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Dave Coffey. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Legal Shield, and happy to announce the press release went out about an hour ago that we are protecting 1,633,613 individuals with our ID Shield and Legal Shield products as of March 31st. So very excited to be here. We're in the business of marketing and selling legal plans, ID theft protection plans, and our newest entity called Launch by Legal Shield that will help entrepreneurs form their own small businesses and incorporate them.
That's quite a number. I think after 1,600,000, you could have made up any numbers there, and you'd be good.
1,633,613.
Very good.
Fourth straight consecutive month for the record, so very proud of that.
Excellent. My name is Dean Sonderegger. I work for Wolters Kluwer. I run legal markets in the United States. I have a software background and used to run a software business at a competitor to Wolters Kluwer, which will remain nameless, but is owned by the mayor, or the former mayor. But I worked with David Perla there. But I have come into Wolters Kluwer, which has been, in a lot of cases, a traditionally book-based business. And we're in the process of moving into, I guess, the digital world. So digital world looks a little more like software than true content. So that's why I've come into this. We have a motto that we say when we go through and we look at new product that we're building, it has to have one of two things, hopefully both. It has to either reduce the amount of time an attorney takes to perform a task, or it has to lead them to a better outcome for their client. And if you do both of those things, you do pretty well. So one of the things that's been a focus for us has been organic investment in technology to try and change kind of our product mix. But a big part of that also is working with partners. Partners to speed time to market, reduce risk for us, and to really, when we look at that from those two perspectives, and then aligning incentives for the partner as they grow also. So that's kind of where and why I'm here.
Great. Pass the mic someplace else.
All right, you hang on to it. So let me start by asking all of you, but maybe it's more of a TR Kluwer question. How do you decide what technologies, what assets you're going to build internally, and where you're going to partner with early stage companies, innovation businesses?
Excellent question, and one that's debated hotly within the company on a regular basis. Every time I make a partnership or form a partnership with somebody, there's somebody inside the company that says, "Why are we not building this?" Right? So I think that when you look at it, you say, where are core competencies that we do well? So we do a very nice job of managing content. We do a very nice job of enhancing that content, search discoverability. So those things tend to stay in our wheelhouse. When you start to get outside of that, you start to talk about analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, a variety of things, workflow. Those are things that are less of a core competency historically. So there we start to get very picky and we start to say, that's a place that we're going to look outside for. And then it starts to come down to a build by partner discussion at that point in time. And you really look at all three of those, because I'm always going to have the person inside that's saying, hey, we could build this cheaper and faster. So we said, well, let's look at that, but let's also look at the things outside the box.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. I was actually part of the corporate development group at Thomson Reuters before my current job, and at the time we were doing 40 acquisitions when I was there, a year, right? And I think the big shift for us, the big shift for us has been that we are doing less acquisitions and we're more focused on organic investment. And I think the company in general has been focusing more on developing that build by partner strategy that we did not really do before when we were doing 40 acquisitions a year and having integration issues. Yeah, sorry. So I think when the core thesis right now for building versus buying, I think, is understanding what we do well at the Thomson Reuters level. So it's not just the legal business unit of Thomson Reuters, but we also leverage technologies from F&R, from the tax and accounting business, and from risk. And you have technologies, for example, around information extraction that we're working on. You have technologies around tagging that really scale across all the businesses. Those are the capabilities that we would normally build. When we are looking to acquire capabilities, you would look at things that tend to be harder to develop at the enterprise level, that are less scalable, and that are quick plugs and plays. So I think a lot of the most recent acquisitions, for example, we acquired recently a company in the legal business unit called Contract Express that does contract automation. That would follow that thesis where it's a quick plug and play.
So our real focus on build versus buy is how fast we can get operational leverage. And let me give you kind of a real life example. 24 months ago, at the end of this month, we acquired Shake Law, which some of you in the room, I believe, are familiar with. And what that really did for us is we looked and we said, okay, we really don't have a mobile development team. We really don't have a very good app presence. What would give us operational leverage to get to that space very, very quickly, in conjunction with giving us the ability to have further engagement with our members. And so it gave us operational leverage both in terms of time to market with what we could do, gave us operational leverage with how we went to market with the capabilities of mobile development and app development. And then finally, it gave us further engagement to retain our members, get more lifetime value out of them. So that's kind of how we look at it with build versus buy, and it's not an either or, right? It's both, where some things are built internally, other things are bought externally. But really, it's how do we gain the operational leverage in terms of retaining members, growing membership, or connecting with our partner law firms is what we're looking at.
Bill, what have you seen in terms of these companies where they're successful in partnering with these large players?
So, yeah, my background is actually sort of on both sides. So, in the previous role, I used to do the business development with Citrix. So, I would put together relationships on a global level between Citrix and a Sony or Fujitsu or Canon, or also a really great startup company that we were going through the build buy process as well. And what I found is most successful on smaller companies, and when I talk with my clients, is understanding what's expected on both sides. So oftentimes a smaller company will say, yeah, we want to integrate, and they might have sort of a loose commitment on a larger company and use that as sort of a nugget and go do lots and lots of development work and plan around a strategy and all of these things, but never really tied a lot of things down with that larger company. So what does that partnership look like? You know, who is going to do the dev work? What is a clear go-to-market strategy? How are we opening up new channels of business? And a lot of times I think sometimes smaller companies will sort of talk themselves out of a deal with having unrealistic expectations of what the larger company should do. And so the biggest goal of from the smaller company, in my perspective, is to gain market share awareness, and then actual sales. And so if those three things aren't part of the deal, then it can often get lost in the mix. But a lot of times, a smaller company sometimes will want to push the dev work to the larger company. And the expectation really needs to be that, you know, if you look at both sides, what you have to offer is not a larger client base. You know, you don't have, you know, probably a market size opportunity that the other company does. But you do have a great product, likely a very good strategy, and the ability to do that dev work. So sometimes the expectations of the smaller company can be unrealistic, and they'll over negotiate and overwork a deal trying to get something that is just unrealistic.
So here's the challenging question. If you want to give advice, and let me actually take a break for 1 second. I want to get a sense of this audience. How many people here are with smaller, more innovative legal tech, legal data, legal analytics businesses? That's helpful. So for this group, if you want to partner with one of the big players in this space, what are the things that you need to do with your business to make yourself attractive? I'll give you one example, which is your code base better be clean. If you're using open source code in places that you're not supposed to, that creates big liability issues for big firms. We're going to be terrified of that. We're going to run away screaming from that. So that's my opener. Why don't we go down the list? What other stuff should this group be thinking about by the time they get to your door and they're talking to you that'll make them a more appealing partner?
Well, I think, you know, having a partnership is like any other relationship that you're in, right? So the first thing that we look at is the team that we're dealing with. And so you've got to be credible. You've got to be presentable. In front of these law firms are conservative organizations, so you got to be credible. You got to be able to get in front of them and work with us. And then I think that the other thing that you got to realize is have an understanding of what each party is bringing to the table. So if you have an expectation that you know, we understand that our benefit we give to a smaller company in a lot of cases is market access and credibility. So all of a sudden you start working with us and you have 150 salespeople or more and a big marketing budget going into law firms, big to small, around the country, and potentially around the world, depending on what the offering is. So that's the value that we're bringing to the table, and the fact that companies know that we'll be around year after year after year, so that there's no danger if they adopt a workflow solution that it goes away. That's what you should be looking for when you're talking with us. I think people that come in and sometimes say, well, gosh, I can get to the market myself, but I'll work with you if you really want me to. That's not it's kind of a non-starter. So that would be my response.
I think the biggest thing you should have in order is how you work. We switched over to Agile as of January 1st throughout the company from the CEO down, and we really have a delivery mechanism by every group within the company delivers value every 2 weeks. And that, again, is every 2 weeks, continuous improvement in an agile method. And that's what we've adopted in terms of philosophy. We consider ourselves a 45-year-old startup that we're going through. And some of it is startup pain because you can imagine applying agile to old systems like AS400 and those types of things aren't exactly agile, but really looking at how we can bring in those partners who can work with us and increase that lifetime value every 2 weeks in an agile way.
And I'll give you I'll give you a very lawyerly answer. I think it depends, right? What the type of partnership that you're looking at. So, for instance, we have partnered with law firms. We have our managed services group has partnered with a law firm in the UK to look at making the derivative sort of clearing process or reclassifying some of the contracts to comply with regulatory change more efficient. That's a partnership that is more commercially focused. Then you have partnerships that are technology based, so where we're licensing the technology and embedding that technology into our products. That's a different sort of partnership. We have another partnership, I'll give you another example, in Canada where we are commercializing a third-party application on our Canadian tax research platform. And there's actually a link out into their application from there. And that's a separate form of partnership. I think what we look for when we explore partnerships is what is the strategy? What will be the strategic relationship for us in doing business with this smaller company, right? In some cases, our sales channel as a large company, to Dean's point, is the value added for that smaller company. In other cases, it's going to be our market knowledge. For example, we are working now with some blockchain technologies, and they have no way to get into the legal vertical, and we would help them with that. So I think it depends really on where we would find the strategic fit, but not all partnerships are equal, and as we are seen as a vendor sometimes to some of our customers, we would partner or create or start some relationships with some of the legal technology providers or smaller companies as vendors, and then that would evolve. I think one of the key things for us is the nimbleness and the flexibility and the ability to go a little bit outside of the SOW and try different things. Once we start getting into that sort of relationship, at least from where I stand from in the innovation group, then you really start talking about partnerships.
So one of the things that my firm does is helps sort of polish up and make the business case and the strategy more compelling to a larger company when representing a smaller company. And that can mean a couple different things. So the first thing that we have to identify is what is the very, very clear problem that your company is solving for a larger company. I've had many companies with our larger company say, we want to integrate with Citrix. Well, that's fantastic. Citrix has about 43 different products. What solution? Well, we were thinking about this product. Okay, what were we thinking about? And so what happens is the more information that you can have ahead of time and a very clear message that you're trying to communicate establishes your credibility and gets their attention. And then it's, how do you structure those conversations and how do you behave as a partner? So if, you want to make things very, very simple for a larger company, you want to, be the people that, yes, they need this on time, you got that on time. Their company culture is, this, you want to be able to fit into that somehow. But the worst thing you can do sometimes is bring together, call the attention to a real gap in potential technology and draw a need to why a larger company should integrate with this category. But then maybe it's a difficult situation to work through, there could be other reasons, and they identify that and say, yeah, that's a great idea. There's a good chance that you're not the only solution in your category. And so they may pick up the phone and all of a sudden find a need to say, yeah, now we have a gap, we need to fill that, and talk to 3 other different partners. And one picks up that phone and totally gets it and is just on it. And then you did a really, really great job of solving a need for the larger company, and your competitor is really, really happy and they are appreciative of that. And the difference is they understand how to structure those conversations, how to work with larger companies, and how to get things done. And sometimes that comes back to, the never-ending over-negotiation and having unrealistic expectations. So that's one of the things that we focus on is how to prepare you for those larger structured conversations.
And I think that's an important point is, and you guys tell me if you agree with this, that these organizations are big and they're complex and they're doing a whole bunch of different things, right? You have one thing you're doing, it's 120% of your time. They have 7,000 things. And so having thought through a lot of the questions they're going to have about your value proposition will make the conversation a lot easier. My experience was I was much happier talking to a small company who said, here's the offering, here's the part of your business that we're relevant to, here's how our offering fits into yours, here's how our technology will fit in, here's how we think the economics should work. So you're giving me a roadmap for the conversation as opposed to showing up and going, you have a lot of salespeople, we'd like you to make us a lot of money somehow, right? The tolerance level for that, I think, goes down unless you have a magic box. Let me ask the group the tough question I'm guessing is in everybody's head. So you're trying to penetrate these monolithic organizations, right? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees. Maybe hopefully you've done your research and you know what part of the business you're relevant to. But if you go on the website, you see, you know, the CEO's name, CFO's name. How does this group penetrate your organization? Let's assume they've got a really good thesis, they've thought it through, they understand their value proposition, you know, how they would fit into your offering. Where should they go within your organization? Who should they dial for dollars if they don't have a personal relationship with somebody in the organization?
Yeah, let me take that one because the short answer is talk to someone like me. Right? So that have so you have people that have these sorts of innovation business development roles that are mandated with, you know, creating these relationships with startups and making some of these proof of concept pilots, experiments happen. I think you know, you'll find people like me here in these sorts of events, and I would say unless you're related to the president, CEO, or one of the VPs, or have a close relationship, that's not going to be the route. I think the route will be find a champion, someone that is able to navigate the organization for you and that understands the value proposition, that you are able to convince that person of the uniqueness of the value proposition, and that 1 plus 1 here will be 3, so that this person can help you navigate the organization. It is, to Michael's point, you know, Wolters Kluwer, Thomson Reuters, Lexus, they are big organizations, but it is a changing environment. I mean, you know, we're in the same panel here, even though we have traditionally been in competing firms. And I think all of us are open to exploring these sorts of relationships, but you have to find the right person. So it's still a relationship based.
Well, ours is a little easy because we're a 45-year-old startup. Anything that shows up on a digital screen reports to me. So if any of your products show up on a phone or a computer, then it goes to me. It's pretty much that simple. But let me break down our business for you just in terms of how we think about it, right? There is no money in our business unless a member is acquired, engaged, and retained, right? And it's that simple yet that complex. We need to acquire new members, we need to engage the ones we have, and we need to keep them retained for longer periods of time as part of their membership, right? And it's kind of that simple. We pay our provider law firms per capita for our members in force, so we all have the mutual advantage of acquiring new members, engaging the ones we have with our products and services, and retaining them for a longer period of time. Those are the 3 kind of areas that we are most interested in partnering with technology providers for.
So I echo some things from Carlos. I think that the best thing that you can do is be at an event like this and meet somebody face to face. It could be this, it could be legal tech, it could be any of a variety of venues, but if you meet somebody face to face, exchange cards, then you can call me or contact me, right? And I'll take your call or I'll read your email. And I may not be the right person, but then it's like any other complex sale, who in the organization do I need to talk to? And do a little bit of, hey, I'd like to talk with you, just information to understand how the organization is structured, where do you sit in that, who should I try and get in touch with, would you refer me, kind of thing. And that's, I think, it's really, and there's probably a lot of people you end up talking to before you get to the right person that's going to be able to get you some movement on a particular deal. That I would say, but I don't even answer my phone, my work phone, honestly. You know, phone calls, emails are very hard because there's so much that comes in. So it really helps if you've got a personal connection. LinkedIn is great, but again, it helps if I've met you, and then I will pay attention and respond back to that. So I think that's the key. And just realize that, you know, titles and roles don't necessarily track in one of the larger organizations. So you can meet the executive vice president of business development at a company like Wolters Kluwer, and they may have no ability to move you. Because they've just been there for a long time and they might actually be in a marginalized position at this point in time. So I would say, you know, do a lot of networking where you can meet people in person or get introductions. If you have a client that you've got an early client, say, hey, who have you been working with? Who is the sales rep? Could you refer me? Talk to the sales rep and say, hey, I'm trying to get in. I don't know where to go. Where should I go? So.
I think, let me add to that just a little bit. I think that is a great point, Dean. If you're able to bring a client to the table and come in through the sales channel, that will open the door for you. All of these big companies are always looking for. Exactly. So I think you know, besides finding a champion, definitely go that route.
One thing to also help you prepare as being on both sides is you need to find lots and lots of research. you have to be very prepared for every conversation that you're having. You have to start somewhere, and that's okay. The key thing is to find some sort of advocate. Maybe that's a second person contact that you have on LinkedIn, and maybe they are a junior level role, and maybe you know that they're not going to be part of the decision process. You've got a good relationship, they can give you some insights on that organization and start pointing you in the right direction. And then one thing that I like to do is just over prepare and network for events and trade shows. So if there's someone that you want to speak to, go ahead and start talking to the people that maybe they report to understand those pain points weeks and maybe even a month or so advance before a trade show. And then all of a sudden, if you have sort of earned that right because you have 3 or 4 very specific bullet points that you want to speak to a VP of BD at a trade show instead of walking up to the booth and trying to pitch this whole idea that you've been thinking of for months. So the more that you can prepare and find that advocate internally, the better off you'll be.
The one thing I'll add to that is remember scale. Your business is incredibly important to you. The specific customer problem you're solving is incredibly important to you. But in these organizations, you have people who have massive headcount and massive revenue goaling, and your particular problem may only be a relatively small part of their world. My view is, in most cases, you want to try to get to somebody in the organization for whom the problem you're solving is a significant enough part of their business that they care. So if you're solving a problem that represents 0.1% of their business, if they're the CEO of Wolters Kluwer, they just can't be that focused or that interested. You need to find the advocate for whom partnering with you actually changes their life in a small way. We'll help them hit their numbers, we'll help them address a client problem they've been hearing about. So it's ironically maybe counterintuitive, but going to the CEO may not be the best way to get engagement from these companies. It may be going to somebody who runs a $50 million, $100 million business line, but who really cares about what it is, the problem that you're solving. And then the other people are the innovation people and the business development people whose job it is to be connectors within these organizations. Let me stop for a second, because I've been asking a lot of questions. Anything you guys want to talk about in particular, thinking about this audience and how they create effective partnerships with your businesses, or where you're particularly focused on partnering versus stuff that you're either not interested in pursuing or you're going to pursue internally no matter what?
I think one thing I just wanted to mention is partnering with a large firm like Thomson Reuters, Wolters Kluwer, Lexus is very attractive for a smaller company, but you also need to be aware of the time suck and as Michael mentioned, these are big organizations. In order to get something started, it's going to be a lot of work. That might pull some of the resources that you at that point in time need to focus to develop your business. So I think to Michael's earlier point, you need to have a very clear strategy as to why you're pursuing a partnership with a large organization, understanding that if that partnership happens, that you may be pulled away from your core focus areas and you might lose track there. So just a word of caution.
I guess two things. One is I think that when you partner with a large organization, somewhat to Carlos's standpoint, let's assume that you have the ideal workflow product for a particular problem the attorney's trying to solve. And you're using Thomson, you're using us, using Lexus as a channel in some fashion with the idea that eventually we'll see the light and make an acquisition, or not. But as the case is, I think don't underestimate the amount of time it's going to require on your part in not just setting up the partnership, but in the execution of the partnership. I've done this a couple times from the side of the licensor and as well as the licensee. And if you're the person that is providing the service, you have this deep knowledge of the workflow, and you have an amazing ability in all likelihood to speak to it because you've probably lived it at some point in time, or you've been, think about 100%. That's what you bring to the table. If you have 150 salespeople, 200 salespeople, even 5 salespeople that are generalists, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do a lot of hand-holding to leverage that channel. They're selling 15, 20, 100 things. you're not going to be able to get their attention to learn the ins and outs of transfer pricing, licensing, whatever it is that you're going to go down the path of. You're going to need to support that channel to get the leverage out of it. And so I've been on the side where I've had a product that I've had has been resold, and we didn't go into it that way and realized, oh my God, the financials of it just don't work for us because we didn't count on having a dedicated sales engineer for all intents and purposes supporting it. So that's one thing I would say. And then struggling to get back to the second thing I was going to say. The second thing I was going to say has left me, so I'm going to pass the mic back.
I'm sure he'll remember it right now. So my advice would be twofold. One is to focus on the concept of and not or, right? Again, we're looking for any way we can get operational leverage within our organization of how we can recruit, retain, and engage members, right? And then second is focus on the why, right? Of really what's the purpose and what is the value you're going to be driving every 2 weeks for us in an agile method, right? And those are really the two concepts that we've most embraced when we look at partnering. See, I told you.
The other thing I was just going to say is that there is nothing more compelling when you're talking to me about a product that you've got if you have a customer that's a reputable customer, for me probably a large customer, that is using the product. So if you get the early adopter, that's the biggest thing we have. We have a lot of people call us, they have great ideas, but they haven't really made any penetration. Having one reputable client that's referenceable, that you've actually solved the problem for, speaks volumes. You don't even have to have a lot of revenue. If you solve that problem for one firm, the likelihood is that other firms are going to have the same problem. So I think that's one of the things. And when you start talking, first of all, that firm may be a customer, leverage them, but I think when you start talking to Thomson, Lexus, any of us, reference the fact, hey, such and such a firm, we've got our first adopter over here, that has legs.
It's also very important, and I mean, it's a great win if any one of your companies can structure a very good relationship with any of these. These are the big oceans, as I would call them out there. But it's very important when you're structuring contracts and thinking through these things that you are going to receive some sort of go-to-market strategy benefit from. I've seen them happen. I've seen them happen at Citrix and other things where there's lots and lots of effort and work, but there was no one really tracking that process through. There was never any real paperwork. There was, the guy that was really into it left, or now he's in HR somewhere, or something like that. And you've spent 6 months based on something that you really thought was going to come through. And so when I talk about like the big oceans, like that's great, but a lot of streams don't end up right in the ocean. There's a lot of lakes and rivers out there that could be much better partners because they have the bandwidth to really partner with you. Things get lost in large organizations. It happens, but you're better off in a lot of cases if you can find that truly active business partner where it's like 1 + 1 = 3. And if you have a really, really clear path, those are the ones that you should equally and sometimes more focus on there. Because maybe truly you're not quite ready for a really large partnership. But if you spend like a year just pounding on these big whales, nothing happens. But you're able to get some quick wins with smaller companies, and you guys are working together, and everything's moving, and you're actually tying revenue to it in a quick amount of time. Those can be your best wins.
Yeah, I just want to add something. So there are two types of partnerships that I think might be interesting for the audience here that someone like Thomson Reuters would look at, or at least that I would look at. So one is where, and this is I think the least frequent one, where we are co-experimenting on developing and finding the right value proposition. This essentially means that you have a technology, you have a proposition that you need to pivot, and where we have something to add where we can help you make that pivot because we believe on the value proposition or the strategy that we can do together. That's less frequent. I think what's more attractive for the big companies because of the bandwidth concerns is where you already tested the proposition out in the marketplace. You have paying customers, and you're looking for scale. That's the easiest conversation to have with a company like ours because we have historically grown through acquisition, right? So that's the way a company like ours thinks. We look at, as this proposition be tested in the marketplace, how many customers they have, and can we help them scale? So I think if you're approaching a large organization for a partnership, that's the safest path. The other path, talk to someone that is willing to experiment where they have a problem that you can help solve by co-experimenting.
I guess the other thing I would like to add is that I think it's important for you to keep the goal, your goal, in mind. Your goal is not a partnership. Your goal is revenue, right? Your goal is penetration. And so that really starts after the partnership deal is closed. And it's the stuff that goes forward from there. And so to that end, if you're negotiating a partnership, let's say it's a distribution partnership of some sort, and there's nobody from sales at the table ever, that's a problem. There's nobody from marketing or business development at the table, that's a problem. And like any complex sale, you have multiple stakeholders in the organization you're trying to get to. You need to ask, hey, I need to understand what you're going to do for go-to-market. I would like to talk to the VP of sales and understand what channels are going to be here. How are we going to roll this out? How are we incenting the reps who have 100 things in their bag already to go do this? What marketing are you doing? And there's a difference between just demanding a plan be in the contract, which will probably never happen, and getting a sense of the relationship and the commitment from the people there. So I just think it's very important to know that if the business person is probably in these organizations not got full control over his sales or her sales channel. So it's good to be in front of those people also.
All right, I think I'm getting the hook sign, so I think it's time for us to wrap it up. But thank you to our panelists. It's been really informative.